Have you ever thought about God's revealed truth for your life being tied to your love for Him? It's one of the things that Pastor Ray talked about in his message, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in this episode of Sermon Shorts. It's personal. That was the message title, Pastor Ray, Sunday, where you talked about again how you can improve your relationship with Jesus Christ, and it is personal. And you talked in your first point about Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loved him, and Peter responded. And then after that, Jesus revealed more truth to Peter about his life. Let's take a look at what you said.
You see, your ability to discover God's purpose makes all the difference in the world for your life, but also for the lives of others. And listen to this. This is important to understand. God's purpose for your life is tied to your love for God.
Pastor, in the passage that you used, Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loves him.
Yeah.
Peter's getting a little bit out of sorts by the third time, saying, you know I love you, you know everything. Right. And then after that's been established, then Jesus reveals more truth to Peter about his purpose here. Is that necessarily a hard and fast truth for all of us, or is it a general principle, and how can that be applied to us?
Well, Jesus can do it however he wants to, but the thing about our personal relationship with Christ is he knows where we are with him, and he knows where we're going to be down the road. And I do think a principle that's pretty solid is that, as I shared in the message, that our love will help sustain our ability to walk in the purpose of God that he's created us for. In other words, Jesus keeps asking Peter this question, do you love me? If you do, feed my lambs. Do you love me? If you do, tend my sheep. If you love me, feed my sheep. And there are different Greek words there, and we can over-concentrate on those, I think. But I think the idea that Jesus was communicating to Peter, and by extension to us, is that Jesus knew what was coming for Peter. He knew it was going to be really tough. And in fact, he tells him in that passage how he's going to die. Mm-hmm. I mean, imagine Jesus saying, hey, Lance, here's how you're going to die. I mean, that'd be a whole nother kind of thing to have to deal with, right? But Jesus tells Peter, hey, you're going to die. This is how you're going to die. It's going to get tough. That's the backside of him having asked those questions. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Peter's exasperation is he's going, I know you know all things, and so you know me, so you know I do love you. Jesus isn't asking that to get personal affirmation because he knows all things.
Right.
What he's trying to help Peter do is he's trying to help Peter understand, Peter, you've got to love me with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, all your strength, as Jesus said. Because what's coming is going to be so tough that you can't live out the purpose I've created you. You'll throw in the towel if you don't love me sufficiently. So our love for God is tied to our ability to walk in the purpose of God. Think about it, the Pharisees could carry out religious activity, but they had no love relationship with Christ. So Jesus is trying to help Peter, and I think us, understand how important our love for God is if we're going to live out the purpose for which he created us. So it's easy to live out the purpose when there's no trial, there's no difficulty, there's no struggle. But when down the road you start facing difficulties and struggles, it's easy to throw the towel in if you're not in love with Jesus, just like any relationship. What often sustains a relationship through a rocky time? It's that they have a deep-seated, committed love for one another. That's what Jesus is trying to help us understand. Your love for me will have to be so powerful, it will transcend the problems that you're going to deal with, the trials, the persecution, the suffering, the difficulties, so that when you get there, you don't go,
I'm out.
I can't do this. I'm out. I can't do this. But when you get there, you won't say, oh, this is easy because I love Jesus. But because you love Jesus, you'll be able to say, I love him enough that I will continue, I can endure, I can go on. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think the second part of this, and you talked about it later on in your message, is we all want, if we identify as Christ followers, we want God's revealed truth for our lives and why we're here. But the love may not be there. It may not. And you talked about that later, and you said just be honest with God. If it's not, be honest with that and seek that. Talk about that a little bit more.
Well, as you know, I shared my own personal experience with that, and I didn't go into great depth, but there was a time back, I don't know, 30 years ago, and I'd been doing ministry over a decade by that time, and I remember one day feeling cold and hard, and remember thinking, God, how'd I get here? And then I thought about the church in Revelation that lost its first love, doing all the right things, doing ministry, had a good reputation, but they'd lost their love for God, their love for Christ. And I realized that's where I was. But here was the more shocking thing. I got honest in prayer, and I realized that if I were honest, I didn't even have a desire to love God. Now, I had the desire to do the right things, and I was doing them for God. But when I got honest, it wasn't like, God, I love you so much that I want to do what I'm doing. That's how I started out. It's how most of us start out in the Christian life. We're in love with Christ, and so whatever Christ wants us to do, we want to do. But then time, circumstances, problems, difficulties have a way of robbing us of that passion and just making us survivalist, so to speak, spiritual or religious survivalist. And so that's kind of where I found myself. And so then I started thinking, God, I'm being honest. I know I ought to love you more, but what I do, because I can't seem to generate it right here. And that's when the Lord helped me to begin praying a kind of strange prayer. I thought, well, God, I don't have the desire. Well, pray, God, would you give me the desire to love you? And then I realized something else. I don't think I even had the desire to even desire that. So I backed my prayer up another notch and said, Lord, would you just start by giving me a desire to even desire to love you with deep commitment again? And that was a turning point for me. And I've done that again over the years. I have to tell you something. And it was transforming for me. In fact, so much so, I'd been on a trip. I'd been actually away speaking in Colorado. And I returned home. And I remember laying down. This is the next day after I got home from my trip. And laying down at night, Alice and I did. It was bedtime. And we laid down for the night. And my wife turned to me and said, what happened to you? And because I'd told her none of this, I said, what do you mean? She said, you're different. Now, I wasn't a bad guy, okay? Prior to that, I probably put that disclaimer in. And we had a great relationship. But she said, you're different. And I asked her this. I said, what does that mean? And she said, I don't know. But she said, there's something different now. And she said, I haven't seen this in a long time. And I said, is it good or bad? She said, oh, it's very good. It was obvious. And what was it? During that time when I sought God and asked him to help me begin to desire, it happened in my life. It moved pretty quickly. And it was transformative. So that's what I was talking about. Start there. If you're watching this and you're saying, my heart's grown cold, I don't know how to soften it up. Begin there. God, give me a desire to love you. Or, God, give me a desire just to desire to love you. And he'll hear that prayer.
Good stuff. You can see the entire message at rbcdothan.org. Click on the media page for that and other content. Thank you, Pastor.
Thanks.
It may be embarrassing for you to admit that you don't love God as much as you should. Then you can go one of two ways with that. You can run away from God because of that, and that's not what he desires at all. Just be honest with him. Pray for him to give you the desire to have the desire to love him. That's a great starting point. And we're just interested in getting you from whatever level you're at in your relationship with God to the next level. Give that a try and see how that works. Thank you for joining us.